All right. So who's opening the champagne?
You wanted to, so go for it. If we
All
open
right.
the second one, I'll do the second one.
Oh my god, it's so much harder than the one that we usually have.
Careful, it doesn't hit you in the face.
It's not coming out.
You need help.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh my god. Twilight! Welcome to the Twilight podcast. Twilight episode of our podcast.
Yeah. If you are listening, then you won't see this, but we are on camera, actually.
So you could be watching on YouTube.
Yeah, we're at Read and Repeat Podcast on YouTube, so if you want to see a recording of us,
go there.
Go there, yeah.
Cheers to Twilight. So I'm Taylor.
I'm Juliana.
And we are twin sisters, and this is our podcast where we reread books that we read when we were younger and then talk about them. So today's conversation is about Twilight.
So as you can see by our shirts, we had a little bit of fun with this one.
Mm-hmm.
So
handmade by Juliana.
Yeah, if you're only listening, I did go a little bit ham and make some fun Twilight shirts for us. The one that I'm wearing says The Twilight Zone in the Twilight font.
And mine says, "This is the skin of a killer, Bella," with the little poison frog on it that Juliana painted. So
yeah, hand
fun.
painted. I don't know if you get a little bit closer. I'm very proud of that frog.
Let's see.
We'll probably post on the Instagram too, just so you can see, get a better feel for what the shirts look like. But I'm very proud of this. I had a lot of fun. I didn't use any stencils. I just fully hand painted this, so I'm proud.
As you can tell, we're really excited about our Twilight podcast because this is the first one. This is the first book that we're doing that is really, it was really popular. Everyone knows pretty much what Twilight is. If not, we'll give you a little synopsis. But yeah, like Juliana said, we're going to post pictures of this on the Instagram for y'all to see. The Instagram is at Read and Repeat Podcast, just like YouTube, so you can easily find us there.
Ampersand or and, the word and.
And it's the word and.
Yeah.
It's
I'm
the word
pretty sure
and.
most places it's the word, but yeah.
Yeah. So you can find us there. We're also on Twitter, but we don't really use it.
I mean, who uses Twitter anymore, right?
Yeah, so you
Probably
can
still a lot of people.
forget about that. But yeah, so today we're going to be talking about Twilight, obviously. If you haven't read it, it's a story about a girl who moves from Arizona to Washington State, goes from the sun to the woods and the rain, and meets a vampire.
Yep. Basic.
And, yeah, pretty basic. And their epic love story. It's their epic love story.
Yeah.
But there's some danger and violence and excitement all throughout. Or not really all throughout.
The danger kind of is the conflict.
That's
true.
The main,
and we'll talk about that.
But now, if you haven't read Twilight or even seen the movie, spoiler alert, we will be talking about plot points. So this is your chance to pause the video or podcast, go read it, and then come back and watch. Or if you just want to, if you don't care, it doesn't matter, just want to listen to us talk, then... at
this point, if you don't know what happens in Twilight, you probably don't care.
Yeah,
so
and I don't blame you, but we're here to revive. Twilight. I feel like we're kind of at the end of the Twilight Renaissance, but it's still going through its Renaissance phase. So we're excited to be a part of that.
Yeah, jump in on that a little bit.
So I guess we should talk about our past reflections because, as is the point of the podcast, we've read this both before when it first came out when we were younger. So you want to talk about what you thought of the book when it came out? When you first read it?
Yeah. So so I'll talk about when we first read it when we were 12. It came out in 2008, I want to say, or the book might have come out in 2005. I think the movie came out in 2008, but that was around the time when we were reading it because I think what happened was the movie was coming out, and so it was getting a big boost.
And our aunt had read the books, and she recommended it to our mom. So we read the books with our aunt and our mom.
Right, and that was when also everyone in school started reading it too. So it was a very communal reading experience. Yeah. And I remember that's honestly probably for me the only reason I even picked it up in the first place, because I was premise wise I was this doesn't sound like it's for me, and I wasn't super into the concept. but I wanted to be in on the whole, phenomenon. So I was like, all right, I'll read it too. And so I remember initially reading it, I enjoyed, I think, the story to an extent, but I really think it was the buzz around it that helped me be into it, because I will say, we'll each talk about our personal alliances, but of course there was the whole Team Edward, Team Jacob scenario, and in that I definitely felt more heavily on the Team Jacob side. It just is what it is. And I honestly didn't like Edward at all, really. Wasn't a big fan of him as a character, as a love interest. It just wasn't my fantasy, an Edward type character, I would say. And I think for a lot of people that the Team Edward, Team Jacob thing was all about, first of all, a great marketing.
It really was.
Idea. But also, second of all, it was really about which one you prefer, right? Which one would you date? Which one are you more attracted to? And it was for me, it was Jacob. So, but I remember the most fun was just having a lot of debates with our friends about the characters and talking about, what characters we liked, what characters we didn't, arguing about it, going to see the movies as a group.
We went to the midnight premiere of the Twilight movie.
Yeah. It was so funny because it really wasn't even for me about the story or enjoying the story itself so much. I'll talk about now how I feel about it, when we get into the actually...
Yeah, we'll get into that.
Like this time, I'm a bit... we have a different perspective as 26-year-olds than we did as 12-year-olds. But at the time, I didn't really care for most of the characters. I didn't really like the story. But I loved the experience of it all. Yeah.
I definitely enjoyed the experience. I also don't know if this is something... I probably, because it was so popular, I might have found my way to it anyway, if our aunt hadn't recommended it. But I actually do remember really enjoying the story. All 4 of the books. I remember reading them each multiple times and very quickly. Because they came out relatively close to each other, at least whenever we were reading it. Maybe the first 2 were out. And so I remember being really into the story, and then all of the backlash around the movies kind of ruined it for me. So this is actually the first time I've reread Twilight since the movie came out, which is a long time, especially considering how often we would read books. It'd be a book that I'd be oh, I want to pick it up, but I felt like I couldn't because it was oh, Twilight is completely ruined for me because of the movie, because of what people are saying about the movie, because of what people are saying about Kristen Stewart and her performance. I couldn't do it. But I did actually enjoy them. I definitely enjoyed them when I was reading them. I wouldn't say it was oh my God, this is the best book I ever read, but I definitely enjoyed it. Enjoyed the story, and I'll talk about how I feel about it now. And then the other thing I was going to say was... I don't remember.
Team Edward or Team Jacob?
Oh, yeah, that's it. Thank you. I think I was originally more Team Edward in the first book, only because Jacob wasn't in the first book that much. And then by the second book, I was definitely Team Jacob. But I don't remember feeling super strongly about it until after the second book, and it was Team Jacob. Because the first book, I was just I guess I'm Team Edward because I don't know anything about Jacob.
I think that's the thing, though, is that all the books were out, or almost all the books were out by the time we started.
Yeah.
So we probably went from one to the next.
Yeah.
So I do think
there was a brief period where I was Team Edward, only because I'd only read the first book, and then I read the second book, and I was Team Jacob. I think I'd still probably be Team Jacob, but not by a lot, I guess.
It's a different ball game when you're comparing how you are as a 12-year-old to how you are as a 26, almost 27.
I'm more Team neither of them, but
I think we'll get into it.
We'll get into
as we go.
Yeah, exactly.
Especially because we only reread the first book.
Yeah, we only reread the first book.
You get more of that whole kind of setup later.
So we're honestly not really going to be talking about Team Edward or Team Jacob too much.
Not too much. Not for this one. This is really just the Bella and Edward show.
Yeah, for real. So you want to talk about how you felt reading it through this time?
Yeah. I mean, I feel we'll get into it more when we talk about the actual stuff.
Yeah. But just high level thoughts,
Yeah, overall thoughts. I mean, I feel it was just a completely different experience because I was going into it with the mindset of wanting to be more analytical, also having a new perspective on life compared to, preteen me.
Yeah.
And having a new perspective on teenagers, on relationships, on like people in general and how people function, and kind of applying that to these characters in a new way. So I was able to kind of enjoy the books in a different way than I would have. Just from finding them more intriguing and interesting. And I was less interested in, on a surface level, do I like this character or not? Do I like this plotline or not? And more interested in digging in deeper and saying, okay, well, what's going on here with these characters? What speaks to me? What doesn't speak to me? And what do I think that the story is trying to do? And what is it doing for me or not doing for me?
And I mean, I think theoretically, like, we'd be doing that with any of the books that we've been reading, but I do feel like it was different with Twilight even, because it was such a big book in our existence in terms of just, like, everyone we knew read it. Going back to revisit it, I definitely had more of that same mindset of, like, okay, I'm here to see what is what and, like, understand these different relationships and not, you know, necessarily pick things apart, but, like, just, like, dive into, like, what is being said and how do I interpret it now and, like, what do I think about it now. I had a great time reading this book. Again, it's been over 10 years, so I was excited. I was like, I actually felt like, yeah, this is the time. Like, I am ready to reread Twilight. And so I was excited, and honestly, it didn't disappoint me. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the process. Like, I definitely picked out things that I wouldn't have thought of, like, when I was younger, and I definitely found things where I was like, yeah, this is not even necessarily the story I remember, but it entertained me. I had a great time.
I would say, like, I had a great time in a sense, and then in another sense, it was almost stressful because I feel like I had so many thoughts going on. I would read, like, a line, and then my brain would go off on a whole tangent. I'd have, like, a whole essay in my head about what I think this line means, or what this character's doing, or how what I think why I think Bella is the way she is, or whatever. Yeah. Kind of some ridiculous stuff like that. So it was kind of almost hard for me to get through, but not because I wasn't enjoying it. More because I was probably overthinking, like, everything.
Whereas maybe I underthought things, but I like flew through it, kind of. Because I was reading it while I was on the subway. I had it on my phone on the Kindle app. And so I would just read it, like, in 10-minute spurts when I was going to and from school. And oh man, like, it would make those train rides really short. I'd get off the train and be like, I wish my commute was longer. Said no one ever.
That's a good testament to the experience.
It is. No, it was a good time. We're gonna get into our segment where we read the first line of the book.
Yeah. And now
I'll give it to you if you want.
There's, like, the prologue, or, like, it's like a preview, like prologue, and then
preface,
there's the preface, and then there's...
I think we gotta go with the first line of the preface, though.
Yeah. Okay, so, first line of Twilight, kind of iconic. I'd never given much thought to how I would die, though I'd had reason enough in the last few months. But even if I had, I would not have imagined it like this. So, yeah, and then there's, like, I actually like this little preface thing. It doesn't... It's of a scene that happens later in the book, but it doesn't come back to this.
Yeah.
Like, we don't see this come up again, but it's like, basically, obviously, what's happening is Bella's in mortal danger, and she's reflecting on
her life
and death.
Yeah.
Death
and how she
like
got to that point, basically.
Yeah. Death is, like, a big theme, too, of this series, actually.
Yeah, I was going to say, it only gets more.
And I think we should read this one you have highlighted, or I don't know if I'm the one who highlighted it on the
I don't think I
think
Kindle
version.
It,
but
it's a little bit further down.
It's a little bit further down, and it says, "But terrified as I was, I couldn't bring myself to regret this decision. When life offers you a dream so far beyond any of your expectations, it's not reasonable to grieve when it comes to an end." So that is her, because she's actually the one who chose to put herself in this dangerous situation, and we'll talk about later, in order to basically save the people that she loves. And
I think it says a lot about her and launches really nicely into our discussion about Bella and the kind of person that she is, which is very accepting of her circumstances.
Yes.
And understanding of her circumstances, pragmatic about her circumstances. Like, it just is, and this is what she has to work with. And she's very accepting of that.
Yeah, it really is. It's very interesting because I find myself respecting that more
I
now
agree.
As the person I am now than I probably did when I was 12.
Yeah.
But yeah, you're right. It sets her up really nicely, which is great for a first-person perspective novel where, like, that the whole time we're following the same character and it's really about her. So that kind of brings us into our discussion about Bella. And so, as you were saying, very practical, pragmatic about her situation. It is what it is.
Yeah,
ready to accept.
She might not be happy about it, but she acknowledges that she's not happy, and then is just like, yeah, I'm not happy, but it is what it is. So she does. I don't know if she lets her unhappiness go, but almost, in a sense.
Yeah.
And so
it depends on the situation too. There's some things that she's not accepting about.
True.
But yeah, when it comes to situations mostly surrounding, as long as she's doing something, I think, for the sake of her loved ones, she feels that it's worth it.
For example, the beginning thing is her move to Forks from Phoenix. And so she doesn't want to live in Forks with her dad. She definitely wants to stay in Arizona with her mom, but her mom and her mom's boyfriend, they're not married yet, right?
No, yeah, I think it's either fiance or boyfriend.
Yeah. Who's like a professional baseball player. He's got to move,
minor
league. It's technically professional, but minor league baseball player who's got to move around a lot. So she didn't have to move to Forks, but she did to make it easier for her mom and Phil.
Yeah,
Phil is his name.
Yeah, so that's where we start out. She's a 17-year-old girl who has basically lived with her single mom for her whole life in Phoenix, Arizona. And her mom is kind of described as being flighty and eccentric and out there and maybe not the most responsible person.
And not the most pragmatic, I would say. Not the most, like Bella has become her opposite kind of out of necessity.
Yeah. Which really is interesting in how it sets up Bella's character, because when we see that she's basically choosing this to leave her life with her mom behind to move in with her dad, and we get to see basically that she and her dad are kind of the same person.
They're very similar.
In a way. And it almost feels like a lot of the time throughout the book, you kind of see Bella as a child who probably had to compensate for her mother's sort of out there, maybe irresponsible personality by taking on a lot of like emotional and physical responsibility for other people around her. So you kind of see that expanding into her interactions with all the other characters in the book.
Especially her dad, because as similar as she is for her dad, he's a very like low maintenance, eat whatever is around for dinner, like not necessarily gonna clean. He's a police chief. He's, always working, or fishing. He really likes to fish. So he's not really like the most thoughtful about the household chores. And so right away she's like, well, I know how to cook and I want to have something more than like takeout every night. So I'll cook, Dad. And then she ends up cleaning for him, not because he asked her to, but just because like she just fell naturally into that role. Probably from living with her mom, and that's the way she feels comfortable around the house, like kind of taking care of her parent, even though Charlie is more self-sufficient, it sounds.
Yeah, it's something that you could look at her as someone who's had to take on responsibility that maybe she wasn't ready for as a child and overcompensate for her parent, and see that as maybe a response to having some needs that weren't met in childhood. And you could also see it as just an element of her character. I'm not really sure what the story's going for, but it is interesting how it does feel like Stephenie Meyer, and we can compare this to how the character from I Am Number 4 was set up, how we didn't feel like he felt like a well-rounded...
Yeah, he didn't feel like he was an actual person.
Bella feels like a well-rounded actual person, where actual thought was put into how she is the way she is, why she is the way she is. And she might not be the most vibrant, fascinating character that you've ever read, but she's not...
She's a character.
She's a character, and she's not just an inherently boring character that doesn't have any depth, which is important, because I think one of the things that I remember feeling back in the day, and a lot of people said, I think, like, to criticize Twilight, was that Bella was a boring character, that she didn't really have a personality. And I would have to disagree.
I also disagree. I was going to say, I was surprised rereading this, especially in the beginning, kind of before the relationship with Edward. And we'll talk more about their relationship and how that changed as the characters later. But, like, I was surprised, especially in the first third, to find how relatable I thought she was. Like, because we're getting her perspective, and she's moving to a new school. You know, she's in a situation where she's uncomfortable. But her thought process is really relatable about her social anxiety and not wanting to, like, she's having conversations with characters that she doesn't want to be having, but she's also like, I don't want to offend them, so I'm just gonna, you know, I'm just gonna have this conversation, and hopefully I'm coming across, like, nice enough, but not very encouraging. I'm like, I have had these similar thought processes of being in conversations with people where I'm like, I do really want to get out of this, but I don't want to be mean about it, so I'm just gonna keep nodding and, like, keep going.
And you know what it is? I think that can be interpreted sometimes by people who are reading it, which I may have even interpreted it this way at times, but I think a lot of people can almost see that as her thinking that she's better than other people. Or I almost got the sense, I've seen some people review the books after the fact and criticize them and have issues with Bella as a character. And I feel like I remember some people saying things like, she thinks she's better than everyone else. She's always putting down other girls around her, especially because everyone's always about, like, oh, you know, I'm not like other girls. That's a problem to have a character that feels that way or whatever. But first of all, I think Bella's thing is, it's not like a not like other girls thing. It's like Bella feels like she's not like other humans.
People, yeah.
And so she feels like she's not like other people in general. But also, and so that you could find that annoying totally as a character. But I think it fits more with this idea that she's someone who's always set herself apart from others. She didn't know how to fit in. She didn't know how to interact. And it doesn't necessarily come from a place of superiority, but more of a place of not knowing how to meet someone at their level, and also feeling like she has to hide her emotions to manage other people's, whether or not that's actually, like, true of the people around her. It seems like, and you could interpret it, you could, like, psychoanalyze it a bit and say, like, is this how she grew up with her mom, managing her mom's emotions, managing her mom's whims, and being a counterbalance to that? Does she now feel like she has to interact that way with all the people around her? Because there were so many scenes when she's meeting all these new people in school, where, like you were saying, she was thinking in her head, well, you know, I'm feeling this way, but I don't want this person to know. I don't want this person to be offended. I don't want this person to be hurt. Even if that person is kind of encroaching on her in a way where there's, like, a bunch of boys. I think another reason why people get this I'm not like other girls thing with Bella is because the story is kind of set up where Bella is this new girl in town, a very small town, and everyone's obsessed with her.
Mostly the guys.
Yeah. But even, the girls are all jealous of her, the guys are all obsessed with her. And so there is that going on the surface, which can be kind of annoying to read because it's clearly a fantasy that's kind of being played out of being, you know, that person that everyone's obsessed with.
But it's also not Bella's fantasy. She does not want this attention. She didn't anticipate this attention. She keeps saying how much this was not her reality. And on one level, it kind of is like, she almost enjoys it because she never was that way, but on the whole, she doesn't like this attention. She doesn't want that.
No.
And you will see her on a couple occasions too when she's having these conversations with people she doesn't want to have. She'll snap because it's frustrating to be in that situation where the person's not really getting the hint, and then she'll immediately feel bad because that wasn't what she wanted to do. She didn't want to make them feel bad. She just really wanted to be on her own and be able to think through her own things, because while all these people are fawning over her, she's also puzzling over in her head this mystery that is Edward. Mm-hmm. And so she kind of wants to focus on that and doesn't really care what other people are doing. It definitely is not a superiority thing, especially to other girls. Like, she does want to be friends with her two main friends, I guess, Jessica and Angela, but she just doesn't know how. And then also, once Edward is in the picture, then cares a little bit less.
Then she doesn't care as much. Yeah. Which, again, all things that you can find frustrating as a character, but nothing that I would use as an indictment of the character. Yeah. That I would say, oh, this is a bad character, or even a bad person. I think that there's something to be said for the fact that maybe if she were a real person who was, say, going to therapy and wanted to improve her relationships with other people, you could talk about how, hey, you don't have to put other people's feelings over yours, or you can be vulnerable with people and let them know, you know, how you feel, and establish boundaries and things like that. But obviously, that's not what this is about,
no.
You know?
This is a love story.
And she's a 17-year-old teenager,
yeah.
So it's kind of like, you know, a lot of people don't learn how to do those things even into their adulthood.
Yeah. But I mean, honestly, the main takeaway for me was how surprisingly relatable she was, and just and the social anxiety, and again, not an air of superiority. I disagree with that interpretation. I see how someone might get there, but I disagree with it.
It's almost like because maybe you feel like the story is trying to, because the story is saying this is a special, different person. And now we can kind of get into more Edward when he gets introduced. Because let's talk about the vampires in the world of Twilight, what lore Stephenie Meyer has set up as, you know, the vampires that we're working with. Because, like, there's so many different ways that you could do vampires. And obviously Twilight has a lot of iconic special features. So the first one that comes to mind is the fact that these vampires sparkle in the sunlight. Like, if you've seen all those memes and jokes about the sparkly vampires and you've actually never seen the movie or read the book, yes, they do in fact sparkle, which is why we're drinking sparkling wine for sparkly vampires.
They're crystal glass.
Yes.
Ooh.
And they also have, like, diamond hard skin, so they're very, like, difficult to, like, you can't really hurt them. Mm-hmm. They are super fast, super strong. And they also have, like, it's not just like, oh, they need to drink blood to survive. It's like they have an uncontrollable, like, bloodlust, like, stronger than an addiction kind of thing. Well, I don't say
they have
stronger.
The need to feed.
The need to feed, yeah. It's not just like, oh, they get hungry, they get thirsty just like humans do. Of course, you know, we do need food and drink to survive, but we don't necessarily get this fiendish, uncontrollable, you know, like every time we get hungry or thirsty.
And they do, like, the way that they operate is where they'll have a feeding, go for some time, and then they have to feed again, essentially. Mm-hmm. So they don't even have to necessarily feed at regular intervals, but they do need to consistently. And one fun thing is that it impacts the color of their eyes. When they need to feed, I think all vampires, their eyes are more black. They're dark. Vampires who drink human blood, their eyes are red when they have fed and they're, like, good to go. And then the Cullen family, or the vegetarian vampires, which means that they only eat animals and not humans, their eyes are golden. So I did do golden eyeshadow to commemorate that, but
I
don't know
red,
if you can see
which
it.
I don't know if you can see. Yeah. So I'm the cannibalistic vampire.
Yeah, and I'm the vegetarian one.
Vegetarian. Yeah. I'm sure actual vegetarians out there are thrilled.
Yeah, they hate that term, I'm sure. But so that's another aspect to, like, most vampires consume human blood. Some vampires, like the Cullen family in Twilight, drink animal blood only.
And then one of the most interesting things is that aside from the general immortality, like, unable to be killed easily, they can be killed, but unable to be easily killed, have to drink blood situation, they also have their own personal special abilities that are sort of tailored to each vampire often when they actually turn. So, it differs from person to person, and usually it's some kind of trait that they had when they were human that's amped up once they become a vampire, because, like, everything's basically amped up. They're also, like, extra beautiful and everything, basically to make them a better kind of predator, so that they can more easily...
They attract their prey, which is humans, and humans are attracted to beautiful people, I guess, and so...
Couldn't be me, but...
Yeah.
But yeah, so then there's the special abilities, and these abilities are kind of not well established in some ways, because some vampires have more, like, supernatural abilities that really are kind of beyond what we know humans capable of.
Yeah.
And
so
some are more
with, like,
amped up human abilities.
Let's start with those and then go up to the superhuman. Because, like, Rosalie, one of Edward's sisters, right? She's his, she's sisters. Or his sister. Hers is Grace, right? Like, she's something extra like graceful just because, like, she wasn't, or it's something like that. And then same thing with his mother, Esme. Hers is...
I don't remember what Esme's is.
I don't remember what hers is. Yeah, because it's only mentioned once, just offhand. It's not a big one. Like, Emmett, his brother, you get a little bit bigger, where he's even stronger than the average vampire who's super strong, because, like, he was strong in life, so his strength is, like, even more amped up.
Yeah. And then Jasper...
His is really cool.
Was, like... So I guess he was good with influencing people's emotions in real life. So now he can actually really physically do that, where he can, I guess, feel other people and then, turn their emotions down or up depending on what he, wants them to feel.
Calls for. Yeah. Then, what is Carlisle's?
I think Carlisle's might be his, like, superhuman self-restraint.
Yeah, because he's a doctor. He's a vampire doctor, so he can be around patients with blood and treat them and not drink it.
Yeah. Which is rare for vampires. Yeah. Even everything that the Cullens are doing by being around humans is rare for vampires. Most of the time they're nomadic because they're just killing people and they can't stay in one place or else they're going to be found out. But they, because they drink the animal blood, they can stay in one place and be around humans more often. And then Carlisle takes it to the next level by being a literal doctor who works around humans all the time and is around blood a lot. Mm-hmm. So he has got his superhuman restraint. Then we get into Alice and Edward. And so Alice straight up can see the future.
Yeah, she has visions of the future. And it's done in a good way, too, where, like, it's based on people's decisions. So if their decision changes, the vision changes. It's not like the future is set in stone necessarily until it, like, crosses a certain point.
Right. It's like free will. Mm-hmm. People can make different decisions, but based on how things are lining up in the moment, she'll get a vision. And that's why that can also be useful, because she knows if she gets a vision she doesn't like,
it can be
she
changed.
Can do something to change it. So that's useful.
Yeah, and then Edward can read people's minds.
Yeah.
Just
hear thoughts, which...
Except for... Bella's. So maybe now we start getting into Edward specifically.
Yeah, let's talk about Edward as a character. So Edward is introduced through Bella's perspective as one of the Cullen boys, but, like, the only Cullen boy who isn't really, like, paired off with another Cullen.
Oh, we should explain the Cullen
dynamic.
Yes.
Yeah.
So Carlisle is the dad vampire and Esme is the mom vampire. They're both very young, so they're, like, in their 20s.
Well, they are physically...
They're physically in their 20s. They're 20s. Old. They've been around a while. Carlisle's the oldest. He's, like, over 100.
Like 300 something years. And the rest of them are, I think, under 100.
Yeah. Edward's the second oldest. He's 97?
Yeah.
Or 107.
No, 97, I think. Because he was born...
There's a 7 in there.
He was born in 1917.
Oh, no. Yeah, he was born in 1901. Died at 17. Died at 17 in 1918 from the Spanish flu.
Yeah, so he's like 100... He is like 100-something.
Yeah. He's 100-something. So he's the second oldest. So Carlisle made him, he's his son. Then... It doesn't really matter who was next, I guess. I think it was Rosalie. Rosalie was made next.
It might have been Esme.
Oh, yeah.
I think it was Esme.
I meant of the kids.
It doesn't really matter.
So it's Carlisle, Esme. Kids are Edward and Rosalie, Emmett, Jasper, and Alice. They're all adopted, but then also Alice and Jasper are a couple, and then Emmett and Rosalie are a couple. And to the outside world, they're adopted brothers and sisters who are now together, so it is weird for everybody involved.
And the way that they kind of make this work is they say that since Jasper and Rosalie have, like, blonde hair, mm-hmm. They were supposedly, the story is that they were adopted into the family after the fact as siblings.
Yeah.
From someone in Esme's family. So it's almost like they weren't a part of, you know, they kind of...
Yeah, they came in
after,
so it's not as weird.
But it's definitely... obviously, the reality of what's happening is that they were never, any of them, related or grew up in a family at all together.
They all grew up at different times in their lives.
Yeah, but it's just obvious to everyone around them that they are coupled off. So that's kind of why they have that adoptive story, to kind of keep things not as weird as they could be. Yeah. So they're all these like over a century old vampires going to school, going to high school, which I have so many questions about that. Like why you would want to go to high school after having probably been, I mean, in my head, I don't remember if this comes up later on in the books explaining how many times they've been through high school, but
it is definitely multiple times. Like, they consistently go back to high school.
I have to justify it by thinking that, okay, they
don't go for the full 4 years.
They probably want to also keep up with how education is changing. Yeah. You know, they don't want to be left behind if they're...
that much year to year.
If they want to, like, live in society. So, like, maybe every so often they just come back for that. And, they spend a couple years in high school again.
But again, I don't think it can change that much year to year, especially if you're consistently going to an English lit class and reading the same books over and over, which is why Edward, we're going to transition back to him now, he's got all the books for their English class memorized because he's read them so many times or just heard them read so many times. Which
honestly, at that point, like, okay, we don't have to talk about it now, but if I were a vampire, I think I would be spending my time differently.
Yeah, me too.
But whatever, the conceit
of the story... They do have infinite time because they don't sleep. So
they don't sleep.
It is different than us going to school and spending our time that way.
That's true. They have the whole night to also do other things that are not, like, being in high school again.
Yeah.
But yeah, so Edward, so the Cullen situation is that it's Emmett and Rosalie, Jasper and Alice, and then Edward is kind of like the fifth wheel, literally,
at their lunch table.
And the Cullens, as Bella is introduced to them through her classmates, they keep to themselves. They don't really talk to anyone. And when Bella first notices Edward, I think they make eye contact, like, across the cafeteria, and he's, like, glaring at her, and he looks like with such hatred in his eyes that she's immediately put off and disturbed, but also intrigued.
She feels bad about it because she's like, what did I do? She's just like one of us. She doesn't want someone to hate her for no reason. She's like, what did I do? Why does this guy hate me? That sucks. But she's also like, why does this guy hate me?
Yeah, like, what's going on here?
Yeah.
And I think something that's true of both Edward and Bella is that the two of them as characters seem to be people who have been separated from others for so long, from the greater humanity, in the sense that they both feel like outcasts and in different ways, some more literal than others, and haven't connected really with another person on a deep level, and have kind of gotten into this pattern of seeing other people around them as pretty much the same thing from day in and day out. So when Edward is this strange boy who's seemingly got some kind of fascination with her, but is also, like, doesn't like her, not like the other boys around her. And he's just so different from everyone because literally he's not the same species, even if she doesn't know that right away. He's intriguing. And for Edward's part, Bella is the first person whose mind he cannot read, who there's nothing, like, he doesn't know what's going on in her head. He knows everyone else, even his own vampire family, he can read their minds, but he can't read her mind. And also her blood is, like, extra...
Yeah, it smells really, really good.
Like, extra
good.
Extra good to him, which both is deeply uncomfortable for him and also, like, intriguing. Again, so it's kind of like these two people who were maybe, on some level, bored with life, and then they come across this other person who intrigues them in some way. And so when you think about it from that perspective, it totally makes sense that Bella, already not super interested in the people around her, but willing to try to fit in, does lose interest in the people around her because he is a puzzle now that she just constantly mulls over in her head. And she, again, being used to being on her own, she doesn't need the other people.
she's got this to occupy her brain. And so it does kind of make sense how preoccupied with him that she gets.
Yes. And so, yeah, so this is where we get, like, she meet, I think it's like, I don't remember if it's the first day of school that she meets them, but whenever it is, because they're not always in school, the Cullens.
Yeah.
They don't always come in.
The reason that they like Forks, Washington is because it's mostly rainy and cloudy. But on the days where it's nice, they can't come in because the sun's out. They're going to be all sparkly. And that would confuse people. So they don't get burned or anything when they go in the sun. They just don't want to reveal themselves. Yeah. So the cover story is that Carlisle takes them all on a camping trip. They're just an outdoorsy family.
Yeah. Yeah. So basically,
they can also afford to miss school because they've done it so many times. They're already pretty good at it. So if they miss a few days here and there, it doesn't matter.
So getting into Edward as a character, remember how we were both talking about how we weren't really big Edward fans when we read it when we were 12? I mean, I would say that's still true for me in the sense that if I'm looking at Edward as a character that is supposed to fulfill some sort of fantasy, which is, I think, how a lot of people do, because it's a book, you read it for fun, and maybe you find the main character attractive, and especially if it's a romance, that could be a big part of the draw for most people, is you're interested in the main hero or heroine or whoever, and or engaged by the chemistry of the relationship. I would say, from that perspective, I'm still, like, I didn't get any, like, butterflies over Edward when I was 12. I certainly don't now. And it's not just because I'm 26 and an adult.
He's a perpetual 17-year-old.
Yeah. Like, I would say it's still not a story that for me fulfills some sort of fantasy. I don't get lost in the romance. I don't get lost in the, this mysterious vampire guy vibe. That's not what the story does for me. But I will say, I find Edward a more interesting character and a more sympathetic character on some level than I did previously. Because Edward is a character who gets a lot of flack. I'm not even going to say incorrectly so, for being toxic. And for being possessive, controlling, and straight up wanting to, like, murder Bella.
Yeah.
But I would say that thinking about Edward as a holistic character, okay, here's what we learn about him, right? So Edward is this currently immortal being who was turned immortal after a deeply traumatic event where he lost his family. It was the Spanish flu. There was war happening. You know, not unlike the past few years in this world.
Yeah.
Recently. So he's someone who knows what it's like to witness death and loss, but he's also someone who knows what it's like to now live with a family that is nigh indestructible.
Yeah.
And then he comes across this human who is suddenly so fascinating to him and seems to wake him up out of some kind of just funk, you know, with life, where he finds other people boring. He talks about just being able to be in people's heads all the time, apparently, is not great. And he meets this person whose thoughts he can't hear, whose blood smells extra delicious to him. And so it's simultaneously this fascinating thing that he now has to focus on, but also this horrifying thing because she's human, she's so fragile. He knows he's killed humans before, because of the bloodlust. You kind of can't avoid it when you turn into a vampire at first. It takes some time to develop kind of a resistance and be able to transition to animal blood. And so he knows how fragile humans are compared to vampires. He knows he's also created basically to hunt them. Like, he's not a human anymore. And so it presents this interesting conflict for Edward where it's simultaneously triggering him in the sense that he's got this thing now that he doesn't want to lose, that he knows how easily he could. But at the same time, it's also bringing up for him the issues that he has with the nature of what he is, because he's not at peace with the fact that he's a vampire. He is to an extent because he's used to living that life, but you also get the sense as you learn more about him that he thinks that what he is inherently wrong.
Terrible.
And you get more of this when Bella starts taking an interest in actually becoming a vampire, because you get this interesting counterpoint to Edward's like kind of self-loathing a little bit. And sort of just like the fact that he's kind of convinced that like whatever he is inherently evil to an extent, and that it's a last resort type of lifestyle, not one that he would want for someone who is like Bella is ostensibly, you know, healthy and normal human.
Yeah.
You know, she's not dying or on the brink of death in any way. So it brings up this interesting conflict in him. And while I don't think that you can that it excuses behavior from him that's concerning or irritating or toxic in any way, it explains it, and it makes him a very interesting character to me. Like, would I want to date Edward, being that he does become very over possessive to Bella. In the beginning, he's very hot and cold with her, very baffling and confusing, because honestly, I think he's very confused, and he doesn't know what's right or wrong, because he's got this big moral issue in his going on within him about whether he pursues this thing that's so interesting to him now, that's finally making life, you know, worth it, as opposed to also feeling like he doesn't have a right to, or he shouldn't, because he's dangerous, like literally actually dangerous to her. And like, you know, so I get that there's like a big conflict going on with him. And so like the fact that he doesn't behave healthily or like normally, I'm like, okay, like I'm not going to be like, that's fine, or I would want to be treated that way, or say obviously that in real life, if someone has issues that are making it hard for them to interact well with people, that you should just brush it aside because they've got a lot of stuff going on or they've got trauma. It's not that, but as a character, I'm like, yeah, I'm interested.
So I had a little bit of a different take, because I read a lot of his conflict more as him being a perpetual 17-year-old, because I found there was a level of immaturity that he has that I think Bella doesn't have, because she was, you know, we talked about her, she was forced to grow up a little bit. She thinks pragmatically about things. I think he's thinking like all of the things that you're saying, but maybe perhaps not as coherently and thoughtfully as she is, where, you know, that's why he's kind of grappling. He goes back and forth. It's like whiplash between, it doesn't matter, I want you, no, you should stay away from me, I'm a killer, I'm going to be angry at you for no reason and not talk to you, actually it's okay, I'm going to be friends with you. He's kind of flopping back and forth. It's not really clear what he wants. He doesn't really know what he wants, or so it seems to us. You know, we're getting this from Bella's perspective, but I definitely read it as more of an immaturity. Like, he's thankful to Carlisle for saving his life, but also doesn't really like his life that much, so it's almost like a rebellion now that he's, you know, getting so close to this thing that he could break, meaning Bella, you know, so he's almost like kind of rebelling against Carlisle, but he can't really, because Carlisle's such a nice guy and he really does love Carlisle, so there's some of that playing into it. And then I think he also like he might not have the brain capacity to really come to terms with all of the things that you mentioned, because again, he's perpetually 17. He is immature. I almost found him kind of one-dimensional in his immaturity, almost from Bella's perspective, where I'm kind of like, when you hear him say things, he's not really saying much of anything. Why is this interesting to you? You know, like, I was kind of like, as a potential love interest, I'm like, forget about the toxicity, because it is there, again, I think you explained why very well. But it's also like, hang on, this guy has a lot of growing up that he needs to do, but also he can't do it, is how I read him.
I mean, yeah, well, I don't think that what you're saying even...
I don't think it directly contradicts, yeah.
Because that's the thing, is like, if he's a character who has all this baggage, and again, this is how I'm reading him, but at the same time, if you're reading the book, you don't necessarily have to, you might think, I don't think the author put that much thought into, you know, how his behavior is influenced by his past. She very well might have, she very well might not have. I think everyone's going to read into it differently, and I'm certainly reading a lot into it, but still, I think it's not really so much about saying that he is capable of processing exactly why he is, like, he's not, I don't think he's actually thinking actively in that way about
it doesn't
his behavior.
Seem like he is.
But I think that's what's at play behind the scenes.
No, and I think that makes sense.
Which, again, I mean, I know he's not a real person, and so, like, is any of this really on page for us to say that it was like a really, like, there was a lot of thought put into how his behavior is? I mean, I think it's arguable.
Yeah, it is.
But yeah, that's how I'm reading, and so that's why, like, when I was looking at him from that perspective, that's why I was able to find him a more interesting character. And while I did still find his behavior, like, annoying and frustrating and concerning, I was also more interested in him as a character, because I don't need a character to be fully likable or to be fully, like, be a perfect character in order for me to find them interesting.
Yeah. And I think that is kind of what I was going to say too, was like, I definitely found him annoying. All of that notwithstanding. Almost every time he spoke, I was like, Edward, eye roll. Like, really, dude? But it did make me more interested in seeing what he was going to say. And despite the fact that it 99 times out of 100 annoyed me. I was interested, like, okay, how is his personality going to manifest here? How is all of this going to manifest?
I think that does play into some of the strengths, too, of the book and the writing, as opposed to the weaknesses, because what you were just saying about every time he spoke, it was frustrating, this and that. I think part of that is also because, to be honest, dialogue is one of the weaker points of the book. I think Stephenie Meyer does very well with setting a scene.
Especially setting a scene through someone's perspective. Yes. I thought she did that fantastic. And that was one of the things, that's why I enjoyed the beginning part of the book more, because it was all Bella learning about her new situation, and we were getting her internal dialogue on that. Yeah. So I definitely agree.
I think that's why Bella comes across as a much more three-dimensional character than I even expected this time around.
Yeah.
Because actually paying attention to how her perspective is laid out. Like, again, not the most intricate, fascinating character you've ever read, but definitely a character, and definitely someone who has a specific perspective and point of view, which I prefer. I don't like a character that's bland. I don't want to step into the character and be the character.
Yeah.
I want to witness this character. Yeah, learn about them and see the world through their eyes. And I think she does that very well.
She does do that well.
There's lots of great just paragraphs of scenes where Bella's describing what she sees, what she's experiencing, how she feels.
And I feel like I'm in it. Like, I do. That was one of the reasons why I was so invested in this book and reading it on the train. Like, it took me out of my commute.
It made me, want to go to the Pacific Northwest and go hiking totally. And be
I would love to visit
the forest.
Yeah.
And, there's a lot of times that Bella just spends, like, being in nature and appreciating it.
And that's the thing, too, is she... now we're going back to Bella, but I do really feel like she has so much to her that I didn't remember. I didn't remember that she was really into nature. I kind of remembered her as someone who, like, just didn't want to be outside. No, she was really into nature, and that was one of the things even though she didn't like... She preferred the sun and the desert and that kind of stuff, but she had an appreciation for where she was. I don't know. It was well done there. Edward, on the other hand, we're not getting it from his perspective, so we're mostly seeing his dialogue. Right,
we're seeing his dialogue, and the dialogue, like I said, not the strongest point. It's kind of awkward, and sometimes just really... And the dialogue tags that Stephenie used, so, like, tags being, like, things like, she said, he laughed, they whispered, I don't know. Things like that, but there's, like, a lot of, like, he smirked, or he snickered, or, like, things like that.
Yeah. Honestly, Edward snickered a lot.
And he smirked a lot, too.
Yeah, he also smirked a lot.
And that just kind of, that kind of takes you out of... It's so much different from when you get those like, descriptions that are in Bella's head that are describing something. It makes the characters... It takes the dimensionality out, I think, a bit of
I will say, though, actually, when he, like, would smirk or snicker, sometimes it helped, because that was where I was like, oh... Or I don't know about helped, but sometimes it made sense to me, because I'm like, yeah, this is the immature teenager who's smirking in this conversation where it doesn't make sense, or snickering where I'm like, why are you doing that? You know?
Right. Well, that's also where I'm like, I'm wondering if that's not the effect though that she intended to give as the author, just because I don't know, like, that's the impression that we get. We get the impression that Edward's kind of immature and not, and baffling in how he's and just not really the attractive hero that you maybe want. Whereas we get the sense that he's kind of supposed to be. Bella and Edward are so obsessed with each other.
Yeah,
and that's the other thing that might make it frustrating. And let's transition to talking about their relationship together. Because once they sort of get past it's never really a question of, are they both attracted to each other? Because sometimes you have a romance and it builds up the attraction and it's like a will they, won't they kind of thing. And even if you know that the characters are going to get together, the characters themselves don't always know that, and they don't always know that the other person is attracted to them, and even how they feel about the other character. In this case, like, both characters pretty quickly are like, yeah, no, I'm obsessed with you.
It was more of a when they
will get together and how. And that is the main conflict, really, is because I've seen people really who I think read like Midnight Sun, and they are kind of turned off by Edward because they realize how much Edward really wants to kill Bella. And now I haven't read Midnight Sun, so like I don't know how Stephenie Meyer does the his internal thoughts around that. I'm sure it's pretty disturbing, but guess what? When I was reading the story, one thing that does come across really, really, really obviously that like is kind of a well, duh. In retrospect, but I don't remember even feeling this way so much.
I know what you're
when I first read it. Is that like Edward straight up wants to murder Bella. Like
he really does.
That's the main.
It's
conflict.
not even just like he wants to taste her blood. Like he wants to kill her for her blood.
Yeah, because that's what vampires do. Like they can't have a taste of blood and then
and then stop. So he's not even like, oh, I want to try to have a taste of blood and then stop. He's like, no, I want to kill you.
And the thing is, it's like he doesn't want to, in the sense that that's not deeply what he wants.
No, but it's like just like he's got that urge. Yeah,
his urge, and that's the main conflict of the story. And so, if you're not on board with reading that kind of thing, because that's the whole point, like the whole crux of the story, the whole draw, I guess.
It's like, can they be together and he doesn't kill her?
Yeah, it's like, and so the lion fell in love with the lamb is like one of the quotes. And it's like, what a stupid lamb. What a sick, masochistic lion. That's what they say. But it's like, that also sums it up. It's like they're two different species. Like, it's an interspecies relationship. And them figuring out how that can actually physically work in terms of, like, how can they be around each other when one of them, like, instinctively wants to kill the other. So it's like, I can't even, like, I'm not about to be like, ugh, like, morally that's so wrong or whatever. It's a story.
No, it's part of the story. Like,
and I think there was a lot of like moral outrage about it, and I get it, because like I remember thinking as like a younger, when I was reading it when I was younger, like one of my issues with Edward was just that, God, he's so, I mean, I don't even think he's like fun to be around, because he's so tortured by who he is and how he is around her. But Bella, as a character, doesn't care, because she kind of is also tortured around him. They're just so, like, they're just so wrapped up in each other, they don't even care.
Yeah, so I have to say, like, the love story to me was the weakest part of this book. Dialogue notwithstanding. Yeah. I ended this being like, you don't know each other at all. I don't understand how you could be this in love just from physically being next to each other. Because we don't even see them having too many conversations where they're getting to know each other. And when they are getting to know each other, it's more about Edward and his internal demons with his bloodlust. Mm-hmm. There are some scenes where he's asking, like, they play 20 questions and he is learning about her. Like,
we don't see that on page,
but
though.
We don't, exactly. We don't see that. So I guess maybe that's part of, like, I have a hard time feeling like they actually did that. And so I kind of, because their attraction to each other is so intense. And on Edward's part, it kind of makes sense because of the physical attraction, and because, like, in terms of the blood and how good she smells, and also in terms of, oh, this is someone whose mind he can't read. Like, this is amazing. He's getting to know her like a normal person that he hasn't done in 100 years. I could see him at least thinking that he's in love just because of this novelty. And we talked about he's also a puzzle to her.
I mean, he's literally a vampire.
He's literally a vampire. But that to me is not the basis of, oh, I'm in love with this person.
No, but it's like, it makes the mutual fascination make sense.
Yes.
And
I'm there. I get that.
And I think, like, because they're young and this is the first time they've felt this way about another person, I think I can buy it. Like, here's the thing. To me, Edward and Bella are like that couple in high school that always made out like against your locker, and you were really annoyed and disgusted by them.
Yeah.
And maybe sometimes you all overheard their conversations and it was kind of concerning.
Oh my God, yeah.
But you were also, you were fully aware, like, you totally bought that they were, like, completely wrapped up in one another. Like,
that's true. I have a couple that I have in mind, and I'm like, yep, no, I don't know. I didn't get why.
You might not get it.
Were.
Yeah, from the outside you might not get it.
Yeah.
But you know that from the inside they get it. Whatever it is.
That's true. And I will say, you're right. I think that is at play here. It is unquestionable that the two of them are completely devoted to each other, whether or not I do understand it, which I don't. And I'm not like a cynical person about love stories either. Like, I can get invested. This one, I had a hard time, and I think the other reason I had a hard time with it too is because I felt like Bella became a less interesting and well-rounded character once she and Edward got into it, and they were together. Because, I don't know, I found her observations leading up to it, like, all throughout the actual, like, exploration into who he was, and all of that was more interesting because she was also still having other interactions with other characters. Once it's just her and Edward, it's just her and Edward. Mm-hmm. And we don't get her same perspective on everything else around her because it's just the two of them. And I really miss that because I really enjoyed her perspective, and I didn't care so much about Edward. I didn't care about Edward as much as she did. So I was kind of like, all right, let's go. Why don't you go, like, talk to Charlie or Mike or anybody else, you know?
Yeah, and I think that is maybe a weakness in the storytelling a bit.
It might be. I mean, I could also chalk it up to just my personal preference.
Yeah. It could be personal preference about you were more interested in Bella as a character, whereas if you're more interested in the dynamic between Bella and Edward, you wouldn't have that same problem. And I would say I felt the same way. Their dynamics seem to take away from each other as characters, as opposed to, well, Edward, it's not really Bella as a character because you're from Bella's perspective. But I would say I felt kind of similarly. But I didn't feel like Bella really fundamentally changed as a character. I just felt like No, I think you're right. I don't think that she changed either. It was more just her focus changed. It was very... And what she was focusing on, and especially because it has to also do with more dialogue and whether or not we buy into the relationship. If we're not, like I said, if we're looking at them as that couple in high school who's, like, really annoying, and it's like, you're just kind of like, okay, guys, can you, like, move so I can get to my locker? Which is kind of more the attitude that I feel towards them as a couple. Then you're not going to be thrilled by, like, that second half where it's really just all about them finding out about each other. And then, of course, there's just the bottom line not so great behaviors that we do get, which is Edward stalking Bella, basically. Yeah. He watches her while she sleeps. Like, he breaks into her house and watches her while she sleeps. Right. And that's I'm sure... He does that before they're together, too. Yeah, right. And the thing is, though, what's so funny, I find funny, is that Bella is not really creeped out. No, she kind of likes it. She's like okay flattered. With it. She's just like, sure. She's not flattered so much by all the attention from these random guys at school she's getting, but she is flattered that a vampire is watching her sleep. Yeah. And then also the scene where he follows her when she goes to Port Angeles. Yeah. And there's a scene where like a group of men almost like corner and attack her. And it's actually very scary. Yeah, because she goes off on her own. She was going there with friends, but then she goes off on her own because she's just really, at this point, she's already met Edward and she's already kind of wrapped up in him, like, mentally. So she was looking for a book that she thought might help her understand vampires.
the bookstore wasn't great, so she started exploring the town to see if she
Yeah.
could find a different bookstore or something.
And then she's just realizes she's kind of off on her own, and so she's starting to try to go back to like where other people are, and then all of a sudden she realizes she's being followed. And then there's these creepy men who are about to corner her when Edward shows up. And obviously he can read minds, so he was able to read. He knew that she was in danger. Not her mind, but the men who were stalking her. And then takes her out of danger. Which on the one hand, it's like, great. I mean,
we want her to not be in danger. Like, obviously I don't want
it's like out of the frying pan into the fire with Edward. but yeah.
But also it's just the way that it comes
Edward
about.
followed her all the way to Port Angeles. It's
Which
not
is
like
an
a town,
hour away.
It's not like a town where they would all just be there anyway.
No.
It was like he deliberately followed her. And that's where it's just...
And then once he saves her, like, he doesn't want to talk about the situation. He doesn't want to talk about what the men are saying, like, or thinking in their minds. And part of me is kind of annoyed by this, because Bella kind of asks, like...
Well, I think the reason in the book, if I remember correctly, is because he needs to be distracted away from them, because he, like, his killer instincts have kicked in and he wants to go murder them.
But there is also
vampire.
An aspect of, like, protecting her past just physically protecting her, because we talked about he's afraid of breaking her. She is human and fragile, and he is strong and almost indestructible. But like he takes it too far.
In a way, it's like it can feel like a little bit of like a hyper heterosexual.
It almost
dynamic.
actually feels like, okay, so I know how I talked about earlier that he's like perpetually 17 and immature and whatever, but it also almost feels like he's trying to be her father simultaneously with the protection, and I don't like it.
Not that a father being super overprotective is great either.
No. I'm not
like
even saying that.
More that dynamic. Yeah.
I'm like, the dynamic is also weird when it's a guy who also wants to be your boyfriend / kill you.
Yeah.
The fact that he's also trying to be this protective father figure is like, it's too much for me. Or not too much for me, but in terms of like, if I'm her, I would absolutely hate it. And she also doesn't like it, though.
No, that's what's so interesting, is that she doesn't like it, but she also doesn't blame him for it.
Right.
That's the thing. Bella is very understanding.
She really is so understanding.
And again, it's one of those things where it's why a lot of people take issue with it, I think. Understandably, which... Just because I was explaining how it kind of works for Edward as a character and how I read him, doesn't mean I'm saying, again, that his behavior is, like, good or aspirational. And, again, like, just because I can understand Edward as a character, I'm not attracted to this character. I would find this kind of relationship suffocating. I would find myself feeling like I would have to do a lot of emotional labor for Edward, because while I can be understanding of the fact that he's going through a lot, and he's also a completely different species who has completely different requirements, and is trying to kind of almost fight his nature in order to, be there for me, there's like a lot of emotional work that Bella has to put into that I wouldn't want to do.
Me either.
Personally, I think that there's, in real life relationships where you're working with other people and everyone has been through their own story and has their own stuff that they're dealing with. It's not like everyone has to be an expert on themselves to get into a relationship.
No, there's always going to be some sort of like give and take where you're working through things with someone else, like to help them. And like, this is
extreme.
Yeah.
And Bella is someone who is very understanding and honestly seemed to want to do that for the people around her, which you could also see as immature and more of a response to trauma than an actual character trait that's just who she is.
That's true. I think maybe one of the things we could have touched on more is that immaturity aspect, where I do feel like she's more mature than Edward in terms of like
being emotionally aware
and also like coming to terms with situations. Like he's constantly fighting his situation in some way, shape, or form. She is always accepting, even in that scene where she's about to get assaulted by these men. Like Edward made a comment like, what was going through your mind? You looked some way. And she was like, I was just trying to figure out like thinking about like the best way to attack them. I won't go into detail. It's a little graphic. Not that graphic, but the best way to defend herself, essentially. Like, she was like, and even when we were seeing her, she was like, I'm going to get attacked, and, like, I just have to do what I can to help myself, even if it's gonna be futile. Like, this is just what it is. I gotta try. But she also takes it to a fault. Like, it's immature almost that she doesn't fight more against her situations. Like, she
there's a balance, right?
Yeah,
and
there's a balance
kind
that she
of
doesn't
each on either side of the spectrum, and maybe too extreme in some ways. And now, but I think it speaks to kind of the fact that we're adults at this point, that we're able to analyze these characters in this way as opposed to being 12 and just kind of being pretty simple about it, which is not necessarily bad.
No.
Like, again, in real life, the main thing is, if you're going to get into a relationship with someone, like, knowing yourself and knowing and having a good idea of who the other person is going to help you make a good decision. In this case, though, we're just reading a story.
Yeah.
So,
and also, like, when you're just reading a story, as long as you enjoy it, I think that's really the main thing.
Fine.
You might want to think about why do I enjoy this, but also it is,
or why do you not enjoy it?
Why do you not enjoy it? But at the same time, it's here for entertainment.
Yeah. But I would say, like, for me, I would find Edward very suffocating, and it's like one of those things where it's like, if you have this impulse of, like, oh, I love this person, but I want them to change in some fundamental way, like, maybe that's not the relationship for you. So, like, Edward, not the guy for me.
And I think another, just to touch again on Bella being so accepting, she takes the fact that Edward and his whole family are vampires very much in stride.
And that's, fascinating thing about Bella, because it's almost like, and we see more of this in later books, but it's almost like you get the sense that Bella was this human that was born to become a vampire.
Like, this is kind of what she was waiting for. It doesn't really, like, the thing I love, actually, is that she has normal human reactions to it, where, like, it makes her nervous. It makes her scared. Like, she does get scared of Edward when he, like, shows his vampire side. But then she turns it around and controls it and is like, yeah, but... It's
like, just because I'm afraid of it doesn't mean that I'm not... I don't like it, It's like the human instinct of fear versus, like, the deeper truth of who you are. And her truth is that she's really into it, not just, like, in the sense that she finds Edward attractive, but in the sense that it's a life she wants to lead.
And this is one of the things I found really interesting about her, too, because... that I didn't remember. Like, I didn't remember her... I just remembered her being all in, I didn't remember her actually having all of these other very real reactions that she then thinks through and controls and is like, yeah, but that's just my... I know I'm scared, but also I'm going to pretend like I'm not, and I'm going to push it away because I am interested in what's going on. So that's one of the things that I really found, like, very enjoyable about her character. There was a lot of facets.
Yeah.
So I think there are two things that we really need to cover before we end this. And I think the next one has got to be
the baseball
scene.
Yeah.
So if you've seen the movie, and if you've only seen the movie, you probably remember the scene where the Cullens go play baseball. It's iconic. I mean, the music is great. Alice, not teeing up, what is it, like setting up pitch her ball. Yeah, it's pitching. No, but like teeing up her pitch, like setting up her pitch. Her whole fluid motion. They replay that same thing 2 times in the movie. I think it's the same exact shot.
Which is probably not actually good form for, like, literal real world pitching. But she's a vampire,
and it's aesthetically
pleasing.
Yeah, the whole they're playing on a giant field during a thunderstorm because when they hit the ball, it goes so far and makes such a loud noise. They have to use the rain to cover it, or the thunder to cover it, not the rain. So, and it's just fun. Like, you're just watching this family have fun together. That scene is amazing. Well, if you haven't read the book, but you have seen the movie, guess what? That's in the book. And it's pretty much just as enjoyable.
There's fewer, like, one-liners. In the movie, there's, like, an actual one-liner.
And it's, like, super quippy, and, everything is just, like, smart
cringy,
and sharp. Yes,
fun.
But amazing.
Well, that's the thing. A lot of this is, like, cringy, quote-unquote.
Yeah.
And, again, like, I use that kind of, like, facetiously, like, cringe culture's stupid, but like cringe culture's cringe.
It's still a thing.
But but it was a little cringy. It was fun. But in the books, yeah, like there's less of that, but it's still like especially if you've seen the movie, like, you can kind of like put yourself into that.
Yeah.
And this is in the book. It's after. I know we haven't really gotten into the plot. I guess we're just kind of assuming that if you're here, you've already.
You know enough about Twilight because it's a phenomenon.
But this happens basically right after, like, Edward and Bella finally are like, you know what? We can't stay away from each other, so we're just gonna be a thing. And so then I'm gonna meet the family. Bella meets the Cullens, and then they're like, oh, it's gonna rain tonight, so we're gonna have a baseball game. Yeah. And so then we really get to see like the Cullen family dynamic, and I think that is one of the things that's really the main draw. If you're not here for Bella and Edward's dynamic, which I wasn't when I was younger, especially.
I'm still not.
Then you might just be here for the Cullen dynamic, the family dynamic.
I am here for the family dynamic.
Because I love all of the side characters, basically. Like, they're fun, and the family dynamic is fun, and seeing them all get to play baseball together
and enjoy themselves is fun.
Yeah.
It does get quickly cut short because
then
we the main conflict of the book, which happens at the very end of the book,
like way at the end. Well,
it's not the main conflict,
but like the main action conflict. The main conflict is like Edward and Bella.
And Edward, can they coexist?
How can they coexist without murdering? Yeah. Without Edward murdering Bella? Yeah. Side note: I didn't say this earlier, but I thought it was funny how it's like Edward is super thirsty for Bella's blood. But Bella's just straight up super thirsty for Edward.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, that's pretty true. Pretty true.
I guess there are probably...
She is. Actually, there are, like, multiple scenes where, like, he kisses her and then she, like, goes at him and he's like,
whoa. Not only am I a good Christian boy, but I am also...
But also, I want to eat you, so maybe...
Actually, I don't know if he's Christian, but he does have a thing where he doesn't believe that vampires have a soul.
Yeah.
And that's a big sticking point for him with why he doesn't want Bella to become one. So anyway,
we're talking about the Carlyles now.
And
the
the Carlyles.
He
turned like half of them.
He did turn half of them, so they are the Carlyles. It's Carlyle and the Carlyles.
Oh, they should start a band. They have enough time to like.
They do. I'm sure there are. Well, Edward can already play the piano.
Oh my god, the Carlyles.
All right, I can feel us getting more unhinged. Let's
embrace that.
Let it happen.
Let's unhinge.
Let it happen. Unhinge.
But yeah, anyway, so the baseball game, that's when like these other out of town vampires show up and they hear the baseball game and they come and want to hang out.
And they're normal vampires who eat human blood.
Yeah.
Drink human blood.
They drink human blood, and so they're like, they've got the red eyes and everything. And so this is a big deal because Bella is with them and she's a human. And so they don't want them to notice Bella because also, like, not only is Bella more, like, smells better to Edward than anyone else, and, like, it is established that she smells better to Edward specifically than anyone else, but also she smells better than most humans to other vampires, too.
So, they generally all are like, you smell good.
So, like, if they smell her, like, it's gonna be a whole thing. And then, of course, they show up, and, of course, like, things are going, like, well, but then all of a sudden, it's, like, one of the three vampires turns out to be a tracker, which... they didn't really explain it, but I'm assuming it means that his special ability is that he's really good at hunting.
That's what I understood it to be. Like, so everyone else has their special abilities. His special ability is he can really track and hunt people and really enjoys it.
Yeah.
Really enjoys
it. And, like, so, like, once he's on the chase, he can't really stop himself. Mm-hmm. And not that he would want to. He's not someone who's fighting against his nature. So he's like, He's a straight-up vampire. He's just like, I'm going to live my life.
Yeah.
You know? And, like... I know he's the main baddie, and he's pretty cruel, but I'm also just like, I mean, that's the thing. Is like, this is why Edward is so...
But also his name is James.
Yeah, his name is...
Which I feel...
is James.
If you're going to be, like, that cool and badass of a vampire, James is kind of a letdown name.
Wow. We came for John's last episode.
Yeah, no, we're going
but meanwhile, we've got, like, Edward.
I know, Edward also, but, like,
which
Edward
we do have a couple family members named Edward, so no offense to Edwards.
No, it's
but
not.
It's just
I wasn't even going to say, honestly, Edward makes sense for him, because he was turned in the early 1900s.
That's why all of them have, like, Rosalie and Emmett and Jasper. Like, Jasper was a Confederate soldier. We didn't even...
we didn't touch upon that, and we
because
don't
that
have
doesn't
to.
come up in this book. We'll talk about it in later books if we read the other one.
And we'll talk about other controversial aspects of the Twilight series if we read those books and do. Let us know in the comments, do you want us to do the other books in the Twilight series? Because if you do, we will.
Yeah. Because we didn't really talk about Jacob in this episode, but obviously there's a whole lot with the Quileute people and Stephenie Meyer kind of co-opting their heritage for the story and how that's, you know, like... And
that comes a tiny bit into play because Jacob tells Bella a story
from his tribe
about
the cold ones.
He doesn't believe, but like it is actually true because the cold ones are the Cullens.
But we don't get too much of that.
No, we don't get too much of that. That definitely comes more in the second book. So if we do read that one and discuss it, we'll talk more. Yeah, we'll talk more.
And we'll talk more about Jacob because he's just like a really sweet, nice, kind boy.
At least in the first book.
In this book,
he's just
anyway. So yeah, but the baseball scene
gets cut short because James decides he needs to eat Bella. So then everyone's got to disperse.
And I will say this is where, like, I was talking earlier about a lot of times I think with like, especially with like paranormal romances, but with any kind of like fictional story, it's about getting into the fantasy of it. And sometimes when you can't get into the main premise fantasy, which in this case is the paranormal romance, it doesn't work for you as a story. And so like we were talking about how Edward and Bella doesn't really work for us as like far as getting into their relationship. But an aspect of the fantasy that I think does work for me to a personal extent a little bit is the fact that like the Cullens immediately are so protective over Bella as a family.
Yeah.
In this way that like it's not so much the physical, like, because there's this whole thing where like they can all run really fast and they're passing her around like literally physically like picking her up and running around with her, and it's like the whole family. So the thing is like I know like on the one hand like Edward being that physically protective and like controlling of Bella is uncomfortable, but on the other hand like the whole family like immediately being
like once she's in danger they're like you're gonna take care of you, and from a family perspective like that's kind of what you want, like you want someone if you need help you want them to want to help you like that, and like almost unconditionally. They're like you're basically part of the family now, even though you and Edward have only been together for like a few weeks.
But it's the first time he's ever been interested in someone, so they're all excited about it.
So they're all like
and they also know what would happen to him if something were to happen to her. Which, again, as much as that might be like, having someone's well-being so thoroughly tied in with your own is like, in real life, very suffocating and distressing. It's also like, nice that they care so much about each other.
It is. Because they really do. They are, as a weird family as they are, which we'll talk a little bit more about probably, they really are a family.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so that's the aspect I thought was really nice. I mean, it was like even Emmett and...
I love Emmett's relationship with Bella. He is like the big burly brother who immediately like acts as her brother and like is cool with her and is just like down.
Yeah. And it's like in contrast to Rosalie, who's like the only one who really doesn't like her, because
which I also find is realistic. Yeah, no, it's
because
cool that they added that dynamic because it does make sense that one person, or at least one of the vampires, would be so concerned about their whole family well-being that they don't like Bella.
Yeah, and it's simultaneously that she's concerned about the well-being of the family, and also that she's jealous of Bella. And
she wants to be
human. Goes deeper than just like being jealous of someone because, you know, oh, they're prettier than me or something. Which again, like,
not that.
I'm not criticizing that as like a thing that actual people go through. But like in this case, it's not meant to just be a surface level like girls not getting along thing. It's meant to be like Rosalie has a past. She has her own ties to her humanity that was taken away from her.
And we learn more about this.
And we learn about it later on, but it's more. It goes
but Stephenie
deeper.
Meyer sets it up in this book.
Yeah. And so there's a lot of thought put into the personalities of all the other Cullens, so that even when you don't get that many scenes with them in this book, like they're all very distinct.
Yeah.
And it's cool to see them all come together as a family and like take care of her, and even Rosalie joining in when she doesn't want to be like involved. She's still involved because her family is, and it's cool. And just like there's also a scene where Jasper and Alice take Bella to Phoenix while the rest of the Cullens split up and try to distract James, and like Bella's, you know, clearly like she's upset about everything that's going on, and she's afraid she's never going to see Edward again, and she's crying, and she's like really tired, and so she falls asleep like next to Alice, and she wakes up and like she's like still being like cuddled by Alice or whatever, and it's just like a really nice scene.
Like,
and I was like,
Aw.
Like, I want an indestructible vampire family to take care of me.
Yeah.
Like, I get it. So I was, like, into that. We've changed for our next section, which is kind of like a little bonus discussion. I'm going to try to redeem myself from earlier by opening this. If I can. So we've got a different one. We've got a sparkling red, which I've never had before.
So we'll see.
So we'll see how this goes. But we figured sparkling red is, you know,
it makes sense.
It's vampire-y.
Yeah.
Let's see if I can open it this time.
This one. Get that out of your way.
Yeah. Oh,
don't aim it towards yourself. Could pop out on its own, so do not let it. I've had that happen to me before, where I took the cage off the thing and then.
Oh, I did it, and I didn't kill myself. Yay!
Ooh, fun color. Yeah.
You can't see it because it's not in frame, but.
Ooh.
Ooh.
I'm excited to try it.
Yeah. More?
Yeah, I'll take it.
You know, it's red like blood. Yay! Okay.
All right. I would like to propose a new toast to our discussion of Team Carlisle versus Team Charlie.
So, you know, we figured...
Oh, that's sweet.
Oh, that's really sweet. It's not bad, though.
It's not bad. It's sweet, though.
But it's not at all like a red wine.
I get a hint of red wine. Mm-hmm. Elsewise juice.
All right.
Okay,
so we figured, because, you know, we're adults now. You know, we're not kids anymore.
Yeah.
Like we were when we read Twilight for the first time. So instead of Team Jacob or Team Edward, which is, you know, a little bit juvenile.
Yeah. Who are we 26-year-olds to be fighting over Edward versus Jacob? I don't want that. I'm not interested in that.
So we wanted to talk about
Team Carlisle
or Team Charlie.
So I think we should each, Juliana's Team Charlie, I'm Team Carlisle. I think we also, like, in general, I don't know if either of us feels that strongly that it's gotta be one or the other. I gotta be honest, these are two, like, pretty decent guys. What we'll do, I think, is I'll describe Carlisle. I mean, you can obviously throw your 2 cents in. You'll describe Charlie. I'll throw my 2 cents in, and then we'll discuss who is better and why.
And what team we're on.
So I guess I'll start with Carlisle. We did talk about him already. You know, he's the dad of the Cullen family. You know that he's a doctor. He's a sexy doctor. It is definitely emphasized, like, Carlisle can get it. And if you've seen the movies, yeah, he can. At least in that you know, physical depiction of him. He created almost the entire family. He created Edward, then he created Esme, his wife. Then he created Rosalie. Rosalie created Emmett. And then Jasper and Alice were created separately and then found their way to the Cullen family. So he didn't create all of them. Just most of them. He kind of created Emmett by proxy, I would say.
Yeah.
And so he character attributes. He's really, really kind. He's really, really thoughtful. He's just nice. He is just a good guy.
He's really hot.
Like he's really hot, but he is also just nice. Like we talked about how close knit the Cullen family is. He created that. Like he, and I think Edward even says this. Like he makes them better people or vampires. Like they all don't drink human blood basically because of him, because they believe in him, because they believe in the way of life that he's created for them. Yeah, Carlisle can get it.
Now, I will say that perspective is also maybe influenced a little bit by the fact that we watched CJDX's Breaking Dawn Part 2 video.
Yeah, and that was pretty like pro
they have a Carlisle fan cam in there, and
I'm here for it.
I mean, watch that video if you
should check it out.
Have nothing else to do after this.
It's good follow-up.
It's good stuff. But I would say that I have to agree with most of that, at least. Now, Charlie, on the other hand, let's talk about Charlie, Bella's dad. Yeah. So Charlie is a single, middle-aged divorcee, not a vampire, fully human, living alone, keeping to himself, honestly, loves his daughter, is a little emotionally unavailable.
Doesn't quite know how to express it.
But he's like, but not in a...
But you also know he does.
Yeah, but you know that he cares. You know that he cares, and you know that he wants to connect. He has a little bit of a hard time doing it, but it comes from he's got a soft place, you can tell, in his heart for the people around him. And he definitely also is not completely closed-minded, because he's someone who, a lot of the people in the town they talk a lot about the Cullens behind their back and see them as different and outsiders. And
which, as we described, is also understandable.
Yeah, and pretty early on, when Bella brings them up, he's ready to go to bat for them immediately. I was like, oh, people are so close-minded in this town, but they need to be more open-minded. And
Charlie really respects Carlisle.
He does. He really respects Carlisle, and he doesn't start having a problem with the Cullens until the whole Edward and Bella situation, which, again, it's like, on the one hand, you could say, like, oh, of course the dad has an issue with the boyfriend, but on the other hand, like, Bella and Edward give him many reasons to be legitimately concerned about their relationship, including and not limited to the fact that, like, at the end of the novel, when she's running away from James the Tracker to keep Charlie safe, and because he doesn't know about the vampire thing, she lies to him and yells at him and tells him that she's leaving him, and she uses the same words that her mom did years ago when she left Charlie to go move out of Forks because she couldn't stay there anymore and she didn't want to live a boring life. And basically Bella tells him the same thing. And breaks his heart again.
But when she's okay, he totally forgives her. And he's obviously mad at Edward because he knows that Edward had some influence on it. He doesn't quite understand the situation since he doesn't have all the facts.
Because Bella said that Edward broke up with her, or she broke up with him.
No, she broke up with Edward because she didn't want to get stuck in Forks.
Yes.
But afterwards, I mean, gets in this horrible accident. It's really James tries to kill her, but she lives. And that makes Charlie even more thankful to Carlisle, actually, because Carlisle saves Bella's life. So he's still not prejudiced against the family. It's really just...
And the concerns he has for Edward, at least at this point, are understandable and valid. And it's not necessarily... There might be a couple jokes here or there about him polishing his gun, but it's not necessarily an overprotective father kind of thing. A little bit neglectful in some senses, maybe not being fully there for his daughter, yes, but on the other hand, they also understand each other very well because they're both similar in personality.
Yeah, and they leave each other alone when they want to be left alone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So he's
a dad.
He's a dad. He's a real dad. He's doing his best. He's really trying,
and
but
maybe,
he's also...
dare I say, Carlisle's a daddy. I want to talk about the cons, because Carlisle's got this really big con for me that is a little bit hard to look over, which is that he created everybody against their will. Edward was dying, did not give consent to become a vampire. Carlisle just was so overcome by the loneliness he felt with, like, 200 years of living alone, essentially, that he saw Edward as a prime candidate to, like, be a companion. That seems problematic to me. And as we discussed, like, Edward does grapple with the fact that he is something that he hates. He feels like he's a monster. Carlisle did that to him. And Carlisle created Esme when she was on the brink of death. And he created Rosalie when she was on the brink of death. Basically, like, opportunistic, like, finding people who are gonna die and then resurrecting them as vampires. That is an issue. Did he create one big happy family? Like, kinda. He did. And he's making life as good as he can for them. And he definitely is providing for them. And I think as a person overall, he is, like, really purely good.
But there is an interesting moral quandary there.
Yeah, and that is hard to get over, honestly.
And it comes down to, I think, how you feel about it as an outsider. But at least as we're led to understand internally, most, if not all of them, are grateful to him to an extent.
Outside of, I mean, yeah, even Edward is grateful to him, but, like, outside of Edward, it doesn't seem like anyone else has an issue. Also, Jasper and Alice were created separately, so
yeah,
they're grateful just to have found him and found a place where they can fit in and also, like, not be bad people.
Bad people. I mean, whether or not, like, there's a whole...
Is a vampire bad because they kill people because they need to drink their blood and they're not forcing themselves to drink animal blood? That's like, an interesting debatable, conversation.
Honestly.
Like, yeah, because that's part of their nature. They're not human beings. They're not, like, murderers, really, because they're animals. They're a different species now, you know? Like,
and just because they can feel guilt and think and connect with other people, does that mean that they shouldn't also go along with their nature?
And so does that make Carlisle's actions different? Because, again, he's not a human being. Like, he isn't. Like, it wasn't his bloodlust that led him to create these beings, but it was this deep feeling of needing companionship. Like, maybe that, while not excusable, is different than if he was just a human being.
Right. Valid concerns.
Yeah.
And as for Charlie, he is a little bit emotionally, like, reserved and a little bit closed off. I would say you can count that as kind of a con in a sense because, you know, like, he doesn't... It's not necessarily a moral failing on his point, but it is something that might be a little bit difficult to work with, you know. He's a little closed off and also hung up on his ex-wife, quite frankly.
He's still in love with Renee, which
that could get
Bella's mom's name. I don't know if we ever said that. It's
Renee. Yeah, I just had a thought, but I'll bring that up in a minute. Yeah, so he's still in love with his ex-wife. So I'd say that's a significant con.
And I'd say another con is, like, he doesn't ask Bella to cook and clean for him, but, like, she does. And he's kind of like, oh, if you want to.
But he's so in that bachelor lifestyle. Yeah, that he's been single for so long, he doesn't really...
He doesn't see that it's, like, a little weird that his daughter is kind of, like, providing for him.
I mean, he does say a few things about it, but he's not the one who... He's not about
to do anything to change
his whole deal.
Yeah.
So, okay.
Yeah.
So at the end of it all, I don't know. What do you think? Do you have a...
It's really hard because I actually do feel like these are two characters that now that we're older, definitely, like, jokes aside, there's just more depth and they're more interesting than, like, the relationship aspect of that rules the book. It's like, oh, I want to see more interaction with Charlie. I want to see more interaction with Carlisle. I might be Team Carlisle, but by a real slight edge. I think it's Charlie has a little bit. You could say Charlie's more human. Like, he's got more flaws. Carlisle is as close to a perfect being in most senses of the word as you can possibly get. So maybe that's where it is, but...
And maybe I fall more on the Team Charlie side because I appreciate that humanness. And I understand that he's got baggage, but you know who doesn't, right?
That's also true.
And I appreciate that he, underneath his barriers, is sensitive. And... wanting to do better for his family.
Carlisle doesn't have barriers to his sensitivity. He is...
Proposition. Team Charlisle.
Okay. Team Charlisle. I like it. Actually, no, we should cheers to that. Team Charlisle.
Now, do you think if they had a boy in Breaking Dawn, they would have named the baby Charlisle?
Oh my god, I hope so. Spoiler alert for anyone who hasn't read Breaking Dawn. Bella and Edward do have a daughter, and they name her Renesmee, which is the combination of Renee, Bella's mom, and Esme, Edward's
essentially
mom.
Their ship name.
Yeah, their ship name. So I guess if they had a boy instead of a girl, they might have named it Charlisle.
No, I think they were going to name it Edward Jacob. For Edward and Jacob, EJ, remember? Like, EJ?
Oh my god, yeah, actually that's worse. I would prefer Charlisle.
Why would they do that when Jedward is right there? Team
so
Jedward.
True. Team Jedward.
Team Jedward. Forget about Team Jacob or Team Edward. Team Jedward. So I think we solved it.
Yeah, I think we solved it.
Is it Team Charlisle as in, like, both of them are equally valid? Or Team Charlisle as in Charlie and Carlisle?
Honestly, I could see it because Charlie does have a deep admiration for Carlisle.
And he did say something about like all the ladies being attracted to him. Yeah,
yeah, and he's well aware that like Carlisle is attractive. Yeah, and I think Carlisle is like sensitive and open enough that like even if he identifies as straight, he wouldn't turn away at exploring his identity.
I think so too. I think he's open-minded, and I think that Esme, look, Carlisle has been around for hundreds of years, and Esme has been around for at least almost 100. And at that point, like, you've got to be a little bit, like, done with the rules of society that say that you've got to have a singular monogamous relationship. Like, I'm sure she wouldn't mind.
Honestly, she does seem really chill. She's really understanding. Like, she and Carlisle are a good match because I do feel like they're both understanding. But she might be so understanding that she's like, yeah, you explore your... I'm secure in the fact that you love me. Go explore your interest in
this other person.
Charlie.
And you know what? I don't really care about the fact that would be awkward with Edward and Bella being together because, like, it's already kind of a weird situation. So
yeah.
Who cares?
Yeah.
All right.
I think that's it. I think we're going to end it there because what else is there to say?
Probably a lot.
Yeah, probably a lot. But I do feel like we had a decent discussion. Let us know what we missed. If you want to hear anything else from us on this topic, I feel like I'm sure we could say more. So, comment on the YouTube video. Can you comment on Spotify and Apple Music?
I think you can leave a review. Like, you can leave a star rating on Spotify, but I think on Apple Podcasts you can, like, leave an actual review.
Definitely do whatever you can to give us feedback because we want to make videos that y'all like. I'll also be posting this on the Instagram, so you can comment on the Instagram, like, any suggestions, you know, after you watched and listened.
And let us know what you think of my handiwork with these shirts. With these shirts. I put in a lot of effort to this.
These are also, Team Charlie and Team Carlisle are also both handmade by Juliana.
Wow.
So let us know what you think.
Okay.
And thank you for watching / listening. You can find this on Spotify, Apple Music, and YouTube. If you are listening on Spotify or Apple Music, I definitely suggest you checking out the YouTube just so you can see us, you know, interacting, see the shirts and stuff. But otherwise, hope you enjoyed it. Find us at Read and Repeat podcast on Instagram, Read and Repeat Podcast on YouTube, also Read and Repeat Podcast on Twitter if you do that sort of thing. Thanks for listening.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Cheers
to Twilight.